I'm finding with people who've had definitely the military abduction, what they call secret space program or the Montauk Project, where there is a definite foundation of trauma-based mind control, often through family systems that have a type of ritual abuse component or parallel to the classic satanic ritual abuse, but it parallels in different ways, maybe within an alien abduction type of progressive trauma at different times to create trauma splits and then add in programming according to their agenda. So it's interesting because in a lot of these malevolent ones, it's like they're directly connecting, doing a lot of the trauma rituals even. But there's
Hmm.
always, like, what I'm finding is that there's usually a family system connection to a cult, secret society, alphabet soup agency, military industrial complex, government, political, occult, satanic, Illuminati. Da, da, da. So once you know, okay, these are some of the other spiritual authorities that are working within human groups that have made alliances with a lot of the dark, malevolent ET races, and then they abduct and traumatize whatever they do, and then probably program many of them as assets if they can to do their bidding in a number of different areas in society because they really want to live through us, kind of like a virus. The virus doesn't have any life of itself, but DNA code and a protein code or whatever. And so it has to go into the real cell that has the real life and then use the real life battery of the cell to reproduce itself until we become them. And so that's the mask, right? The mask, the copying out, which becomes the mask. So this is like what happens to someone who's been really, really traumatized and they never got well. So it just comes like a machine like hive mind directed behaviors to get something that they don't care if we don't know what they're doing. They don't care if it causes us confusion. In fact, they want us to be confused. They create excessive confusion. So we're always following this, what do you call it, goose chase of trying to figure out what they want and what they're really doing, and these narratives they're throwing, these telepathic messages we're getting, and these stories and this and that, and this endless puzzle to chase on a mental level. And then that's part of the game, if you ask me. It's that's how they create the confusion to copy out the original while they vampirize you. So you just become them in their hive mind. And so that's like this ancient program, whatever it is. So we really have to connect with original beingness that is outside of the lies and the conditioning and the bullshit, which is a lot of times we want to believe the bullshit because it's better to, if we don't have our human needs met. I mean, this is the bottom line. They abuse us from childhood, oftentimes severely, so that we don't get our basic attachment needs met with a loving parent. So we never know real healthy love. We're always looking for a connection of love or acknowledgement or whatever it is, maybe in an unhealthy way, because that wound is so deep, right? And so then we'll just follow after anybody who might give us attention or get involved in cults because cults create the family we never had, right? Like that's why cults are so effective. And a lot of times people fall into cult-like groups in order to receive something, feel special, and like their ideology, and then maybe get involved with the guru, cult leader, and then they find out, oh my God, it's another one of them. And they're almost always like, I'm not going to say all of them, hosted by one of these beings, and then they're going to have like oftentimes have sex with many people in the group or connect these astral cords with the entities in them to loose feed and create all these things in order to get something out of that cult member. And if anybody questions the cult leader and the cult narrative, then they smear campaign you and take away everything, that you have. So they leave you homeless or whatever. It's just the same game they're playing over and over again. And so oftentimes with narcissistic abuse, because I'm going to use that as a parallel, they often gaslight and devalue and do whatever they do to erase your identity and your memory of yourself. You can become very confused and very exhausted, right? It's vampirism, it's energy exhaustion, it's removing your identity, removing your memory until you don't remember who you are anymore. And you kind of become what they tell you, like a little puppet who's all abused and just doesn't know how to do anything else. And so that's really what these beings are trying to do to us. So we always have to recover our original self that's connected to what is eternal, and then to recognize what that feels like, what that sounds like, what that acts like, what's its frequency, so that now we know what the real is. We can find out what the fake is, or what the corrupted is, and the different permutations it may take with, like, false light, for example, things. And at first, they might seem like they're giving you good advice, and they might be connecting like you're your twin flame, but you're not really sure if it's them or not. And then pretty soon it goes into more intrusions and sexual energy manipulation, like V2K. And they'll tell you one good thing, then they come around and taunt you and mock you with another horrible, stupid, torturous, punishing things. And so it's basically an invasion of the counterfeit spirit that just seeks to do what it does like a machine. So it's like a machine program. It becomes this machine-like program to vampirize and replace and counterfeit whatever the original is. So the original becomes one of them in their hive mind or whatever it is. So the infection is like that when we find people who are interacting with somebody, and that somebody is corrupted or taken over or working from, I don't know, the authority of some of these false beings. So I see a lot of that, but then the dynamic of this whole love bite twin flame thing seems to be a predominant, symptom that they come with. They think they've met their twin flame, or they're having these twin flame, super psychic experiences, and, their energy is through the roof, and they've, never experienced it before. And they just go on and on and on because they want it so bad. Like, who wouldn't want a twin flame and a soulmate with, fantastic, tantric love, sexual energies? I mean, people want that. It's like an addiction. It's like, unlike someone they would normally date, or there was like maybe they weren't compatible on one level, but they were like super duper sexual chemistry through the roof. And he's like 6'6". I'm like, this guy is probably a reptilian host hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
Might have been hosted by the same being, using him as an avatar or a temporary host while the sexual activity was taking place. Because I've heard of women who have had sex with a man who was hosted by a reptilian, and the reptilian will be present during sexual activity. And it could be that if you do get pregnant and that spirit is in the body, that you can be imbued with the spirit, the child of that, the spiritual parent, even though the physical body might be a temporary host. And that might be what happened even in the early days, like in the ancient days. But yeah, they wanted a hybrid child, and then they took it.
So, Eve, Lorgen, man, I really appreciate you coming back on the show. You're definitely part of amongst the giants in this field. But I wanted to, you know, you were friends with uh, Barbara Bartholic, and I think you knew Dr. Carla Turner. You're friends with James Bartley. To me, those are giants. Y'all are giants. And how come? How come you, James, Dr. Carla Turner, to a degree, she kind of more had a cult following, but it wasn't really mainstream, especially Barbara Bartholic. How come that wasn't in the clique back then? How come y'all weren't getting all these big conferences? Is it because it's not you're diving into more the darker aspects of the phenomena, and you're looking into avenues that a lot of people are afraid to go down because maybe it doesn't sell tickets, or what? Explain a little bit about that, Eve.
No, that's a good question. Well, I know Barbara Bartholic, and we had many conversations on the phone. And I did meet her actually in Memphis, Tennessee, at a conference years ago. And I didn't meet Carla Turner, but I had gone to one of her last lectures in San Diego in 1995, and she probably had breast cancer at the time, and it was her last lecture. And then she died in January of 1996, which really was around the time that her work and James Bartley and a small group of people in the San Diego County and the high desert got together and started talking a lot about Carla's research. And because Dr. Carla Turner and Barbara Bartholic were close because Barbara Bartholic was the researcher and hypnotherapist for a lot of the hypnotic regressions to find out what happened, not only in Dr. Carla Turner's life, but many different people who had come to Barbie about what we called the alien abduction or the, visitation. Some people called it contacts. And Barbie knew, and she knew how to get through to deeper memories. And so we really liked corresponding with her because she seemed to get through on a deeper level than what we were seeing in the current time. And so I guess the question is why? Why didn't they get a larger following? I know that Carla Turner did until she died. And sometimes they say, oh, well, it's because it's so fear based. But there's also people who are very, very popular, gaining a lot of um, big audiences who have a very, let's say, negative view, like Dr. David Jacobs, for example. So it's not that it's because it's all negative. I think it's because we saw not only the negative and the deceptive and the connecting links between humans and different kinds of aliens and secret projects and the whole alien love bite and the manipulation factor, but also we could see that there was also a lot of good and a lot of commonalities between us and a lot of different kinds of experiences, which it really wasn't a black and white picture. But what happens is in the community, people want to believe it's all this or it's all that. And it's being manipulated in a big way by extremely intelligent dark forces. And it's also being interacted with by some benevolent beings, but a lot of false light. So Barbie was able to kind of unmask the false light aspect of many of these aliens, especially like the reptilians, for example. They were an easy one to figure out. But when they come to people and they may create screen memories or promises or, do whatever they do, then you could tell, well, they're false light. And then the false light narratives they would promote through people who still didn't know they were being like totally manipulated and hadn't really done the deep dive into their trauma recovery to find out, well, what really happened and these really deep levels and how far does it go. And so I think this is a progressive discovery over time, even since Barbara Bartholic and Carla Turner and David Jacobs and all the researchers, that I think the deepest secrets are starting to emerge with, I mean, what I'm finding with people who've had definitely the military abduction, what they call secret space program or the Montauk Project, where there is a definite foundation of trauma-based mind control, often through family systems that have a type of ritual abuse component or parallel to the classic satanic ritual abuse, but it parallels in different ways, maybe within an alien abduction type of progressive trauma at different times to create trauma splits and then add in programming according to their agenda. So it's interesting because in a lot of these malevolent ones, it's like they're directly connecting, doing a lot of the trauma rituals even. Um, but there's
Mhm.
always like what I'm finding is that there's usually a family system connection to a cult, secret society, alphabet soup agency, military industrial complex, government, political, occult, satanic, Illuminati, so once you know, okay, these are some of the other spiritual authorities that are working within human groups that have made alliances with a lot of the dark, malevolent ET races, and then they abduct and traumatize whatever they do, and then probably program many of them as assets if they can to do their bidding in a number of different areas in society. So we've known that, though. We've known that with the Illuminati bloodline, monarch, mind control, slave, where it's all like, oh, the humans are doing this, right? But in reality, it's the beings that they're, paying obeisance to, who are blood sacrificing to, or doing their bidding because they're high level fallen angelics under different forms or whatever.
Is
So
it a symbiotic relationship with these physical, uh, I guess the elites of the world, whatever name you want to call them? Is it a symbiotic relationship? Like, are they being consciously or subconsciously guided by these negative dark influences?
Oh yeah. I mean, they run through the bloodline, and they'll add on to the. I mean, we've learned a lot through actually The ones who are learning a lot of the secrets are the ministries who work with ritual abuse survivors, and people like Amanda Byes and, Gloria Hawkins and, of course, Kathy Phillips and Gabi Chung. And there's many others who've learned some of the deeper secrets of how they work. So I think unless someone, and it gets down to a spiritual question in my view, if we can find out let's say, the origin point of the spiritual authorities working through all these things, then we can better identify not only what is the source, what is the real versus the counterfeit, and what is the old end game of the corruption of the counterfeit, and then what is the remedy and the solution to the recovery of that which is pure and incorruptible and eternal and true and good. Okay. So to trying to backtrack, I mean, the topic that I was thinking about sharing came to me actually last week when I was writing a preface for an Italian author who's writing a book, almost an exact copy, very similar to The Dark Side of Cupid. So in the Dark Side of Cupid book that I've done, 2012, it's basically how there's relationships that seem to be manipulated with a lot of supernatural high chaos, drama, love obsession, alien love bite qualities, but with the energy and psychic vampirism thing, where a third party entity of some sort is witnessed by one or both partners and is probably responsible for basically manipulating them behind the scenes in some kind of way. So just so that the people will know, that's what the book is about. And it's really an extension of the original alien abduction, alien interference observations. So anyway,
Before
as
before you get into it too much, Eve, um, explain what do you mean first off by counterfeit, counterfeit spirit.
okay, hold, I'm going to turn off the heater. It's getting hot here.
Okay.
Because what I did is the whole topic of counterfeit spirit came to me, which is really a term that was used more in the Gnostic tractates of the Nag Hammadi Library, which are the recent, well, 1947 and beyond discovery of ancient writings, sometimes before and around and after the time of Christ, that had to be hidden. So it's interesting because the counterfeit spirit in some translations, early translations, they just say, "Oh, the adversary." So in the classic Bible, like, "Oh, the adversary." Well, that's kind of like Satan or the Satan or the Satans, which act to interfere or sabotage your connection with God by tempting you or lying to you and creating all these deceptions and corruptions. But when we find that another name for this is the counterfeit spirit, we actually see that there's much more in their how they act and why they act and their origin. So in the Gnostic tractates by Lawrence Caruana is a Gnostic who did a dictionary for many of the terms and then where the term originally came from. And it's probably too long to share on here, but essentially, a counterfeit is that which is compelled for one reason or another to copy something else, right? To copy something original while they're doing the fake, okay? And they're doing the fake because they want something from the original or they want to do something from to the original. So in the early times with the fallen angels, they wanted to basically have hybrid children with the human women and most likely raped them and manipulate them, just like in abductions, where if they couldn't do it willingly through whatever form they're taking, and I guess they didn't come in their original form, they came in a copy of, let's say, the husband of the woman that they're seducing, and then seek to have them conceive and get pregnant to have their downline, which would be like the Nephilim. And so, but their spirit somehow is the counterfeit spirit because it originated in matter and it has the quality of copying and also to deceive, corrupt, or pollute. So when you look at like the compulsion And I don't know if our video is frozen, so I'm just gonna
Get,
it.
keep talking. It's my bandwidth, so I turned my video off. I may be doing that periodically, so I think it's my bandwidth. It's on my end. It's not on your end, but you are clear. So
Because
keep speaking.
mine just said unstable, and I'm like, oh, it's not doing it again. I should have did a prayer before this.
Somebody doesn't want us to get this information out, and you know what's weird, and please don't lose your frame of thought. That's what this dark influence, this the whatever is this dark force is. That's what they want, is to lose track and keep us in. Anyways, but whenever I have, like, I've done all types of interviews over the years since 2010. Love and light. I don't. I let everybody speak. I have my own. I hate to say belief, but I lean more towards. I like to focus more on the problem, the dark side. That's the problem. Yes, there's angels, there's good things out there, but you call them spirit, whatever you want to call it. But I like to focus on the problem, and the problem that I believe we face, and I think it's a spiritual war that's been going on for thousands of years. But every time I have, like, a conversation like this, something small, maybe not big, something always kind of, it could just be a random coincidence. Okay. But every time I have, like, a kumbaya researcher on, talking about love and light or whatever, um, nothing usually ever happens.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
But yeah,
That
please do not lose your frame of thought. And if I do turn my video off every now and then, just keep speaking.
Okay, so yeah, so the quality of the counterfeit spirit um, is actually more clearly defined, or there's more elaboration, I think, in some of the Gnostic tractates, because I see it manifested in the world and in relationships. Of course, that's what my focus is really counseling relationships, observing these things and working with people to recover. Uh, so yeah, to steal, kill, and destroy is the biblical kind of thing that they call the adversary, basically. And then in the Gnostic terms, it's to copy, to pollute, and to deceive. And it's also jealousy and envy. So, but that quality, when you take it further to relationship dynamics, we will see the classic narcissist psychopath wearing the mask of something they're copying or counterfeiting, and then reifying the mask through deception and basically imposing their beliefs, which are lies, on, let's say, the person, the victim, whatever.
Hmm.
And then if that person believes the lies of the mask and the behaviors that this masked person, which would be like the narcissist, what we call it, like gaslighting, for example. But in the narcissistic abuse cycle, simply they say, oh, well, they come on strong. Maybe if it's a love relationship, it would be the love bombing. And then after the love bombing and all this shared fantasy, wonderful connection, they're your soulmate thing, they go into the devaluation phase, and then finally discard. And then they might go through the cycle over and over again. But this process causes the person to be basically abused and devalued with the gaslighting and the passive aggressive behaviors, where they say they're doing one thing, but they're really doing something else. So it's constantly lying, because their compulsion really is what the counterfeit spirit is doing, to basically copy them out and create a shell of the person with basically a mini me of the psychopath who they can control. And they copy out the original and take their energy, take their pure essence, and then try to copy them out by erasing their history and erasing their identity to be them. Okay. So when you see, well, this is the compulsion and the modus operandi of the counterfeit spirit, which really is manifested by like your classic psychopath and like malignant narcissist or the covert narcissist, because they somehow, in trauma terms, they have lost, or willingly through their trauma response, have disconnected from their authentic original self that's connected to God, basically. and they're holding a mask to maintain and reify the false identity because they can't handle the bad feelings and whatever was their early abuse. And it's usually like a really early abuse, like an attachment trauma. So that's with people who still are like running around, they're just injured and they hurt people and they have toxic relationships if they don't get well. But it doesn't necessarily mean they're evil or they have an entity or something, but many of them do. And it creates a vulnerability for them to become hosted or attached entities. So we've seen this actually with the dark side of Cupid, and even with the alien abduction stories and the love obsessions that were created that Barbara Bartholick, she didn't call it the love bite. We called it the alien love bite. But in and before we even named it, she just called it the drama of the alien engineered love obsessions. And it had kind of like a narcissistic quality of its, really fast and hard love obsession, super wow, synchronicities, twin flamey kind of thing. And then it would just kind of sometimes create all this chaos and unrequited love. And then one might be switched off psychically, leaving the other one pining away in unrequited love and feeling like rejected. And, everything was so wonderful. And all of a sudden they just, switch to flipped a switch and they're like totally different. But then we knew, I mean, from the work that based on what people remembered, they remembered being manipulated and being set up. So that's how we know that these are setups. So anyway, as part of all the how this conversation goes, so when I was writing this preface for an Italian writer who's doing a book on similar relationship dynamics, but not fully understanding the full, I don't think he understands the full gist of it. But I believe the counterfeit spirit is in operation in this, and it goes much deeper than what many people assume that is classical psychology or classical even trauma psychology, or what a tarot card reader would say, or a psychic would say, or the channeler would say, or the astrologer would say. These dynamics are strictly a result of interference by the counterfeit spirit working through many different forms, really. And so what we saw was like the classic alien. It was the classic alien gray, or the reptilian, or the insectoid, or the Draco, or the shadow people, or the Nordics pretending to be light people, or any number of beings. But most of them tended to be behind this reptilian form and energy. So one of my clients who I've written about in my book, one of the things that she keyed in on with her perception, because she did recover and stopped having abductions, was that, and I think it was that she was talking about the Draco, but let's say the whole cabal of the dark ones working together, that one of their compulsions or their intentions was to corrupt the purity of the soul. And I believe that's true. I believe that this is what happens, let's say, with a unrecovered true trauma, let's say abductee or anybody who's gone through trauma and has not recovered and restored the original self. And they're run by the programs or the entities that have these compulsions of the counterfeit spirit.
So, one thing, I guess, one variable at play with this, could it be, like to get your opinion, of course. I've also talked about many a times, and I've interviewed Nigel Kerner and oh man, so many different people, especially him. What do they want? With his voice, what do they want? What are they after? He believes, and I think also, people you call spirit, he says soul, but is that what they want to get down to the nitty gritty part of it? Is that one thing that they're trying to counterfeit is the soul spirit? People say that they never obtain that's never possible. I've interviewed people say that they'll never be able to obtain that. Forgot his name. But anyways, I think that yes, I don't think that with the abductions, I don't think they can actually, I don't know, but I don't think they can extract the soul from the individual. They may. I don't think so. But who's to say that they can't make a, let's say it like a digital copy? Just like when this interview gets done,
Mhm.
Eve, when this interview gets done, it's going to download a copy. Like this right here, this is the source. What me and you're doing, this is the source, what we're talking about. Like, or this, what's recording right now. This, let's say this is the soul. So, and it download, and when it gets done, it's going to download it to my computer. So what I'm going to do is I'm that's the original source that's going to download the computer. But I don't edit on this computer right here. I edit on my laptop. So I'm gonna make a copy and drag it to my SD card, a copy, and then I'm gonna edit that copy onto my laptop. See what I'm saying? Could they is that like a counterfeit thing also? Are they able to obtain that? Is that what they're trying to achieve?
Well, we know that they they can copy bodies, and this was something that Dr. Corrado Malanga made a distinction between clone and copy, and that there was a capability of a type of copying process that I don't know how the copying of the bodies works, but I suppose in the original Gnostic, basically what they're doing is using humans to reproduce and make copies of them that are like hybrids. So if they disconnected from their original source, and we still are connected to the original eternal source of life, then they would need to take it from us to make a creation or something. But yeah, in fact, copying, it's interesting because in tissue culture, like biochemistry, microbiology, if you do too many cell line uh, reproductions or whatever, or one that copy, after several generations, it just dies out through corruption. And the only ones that work are like immortal cell lines, which often are cancer cell lines, which is really interested, or fetal foreskin, or some of these stem cell kind of things. But basically, over time, a counterfeit will become weaker and weaker and more corrupted
It's
over
kind of
time.
like it's
Even
kind of
like
like
GMOs, right? Like GMOs.
that's what you just read my mind. You just read my mind. I was about to say the same thing.
Yeah, and that the essence of corruption is like, oh my goodness, now now I get like how they're doing it and how subtle. It's really based on but the manipulation of our perception is probably the biggest issue, that if we can combat that and come to pure perception and original perception of our original being connected to God, basically, then we can bypass a lot of their authority over us to manipulate us to be and do what they want from us, because they really want to live through us, kind of like a virus. The virus doesn't have any life of itself, but DNA code and a protein code or whatever. And so it has to go into the real cell that has the real life and then use the real life battery of the cell to reproduce itself until we become them. So that's the mask, right? The mask, the copying out, which becomes the mask. So this is like what happens to someone who's been really, really traumatized and they never got well, or they're from one of these families or whatever, and then they just use them according to the program they put in the altars that are run by the programmer or the handler carrying out the agenda of whoever is running the show.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they're doing that in many ways where their ability to manipulate us is very successful and powerful. But I believe there's also a remedy to that, and that we can come out from under that if we recognize this is what I talked about. Excuse me. I prefaced this Italian author's book, was that in order to recognize um, the remedy or to live it, we have to know what the original is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So oftentimes with narcissistic abuse, because I'm going to use that as a parallel, they often gaslight and devalue and do whatever they do to erase your identity and your memory of yourself. You become very confused and very exhausted, right? It's vampirism, it's energy exhaustion, it's removing your identity, removing your memory until you don't remember who you are anymore. You kind of become what they tell you, like a little puppet who's all abused and just doesn't know how to do anything else. And so that's really what these beings are trying to do to us. So we always have to recover our original self that's connected to what is eternal, and then to recognize what that feels like, what that sounds like, what that acts like, what's its frequency, so that now we know what the real is. We can find out what the fake is, or what the corrupted is, and the different permutations it may take with, like, false light, for example. So that, I believe, is essential. Instead of many of us, I mean, there's so much disagreements in this community, especially, the UFO, UAP, who's the good ETs, who's the bad ETs, da da da. There's so many arguments and just a lot of dissension. A lot of it's because of the trauma, the bad ones, like, doing what they do. Now I can't remember what I was going to say, but we have to recognize the real and then follow what that real current is to be able to assess what is not. And so our recovery process would be like recovery from, like, severe narcissistic abuse, and renounce the lies they tell us, that they gaslight us with, which is false narratives, right? And restore and claim the true life, the truth, of the real, of the original, of the eternal prime parent, you know? So once we can make that connection, then that gives us everything we really need to restore and to heal and to integrate and to connect to our eternal, it's really our eternal birthright as human beings, if we choose. But we have to actually let go of the lies that we may want to believe, or we've been told by the psychopaths and the gaslighters and the narcissists and the counterfeit spirit, whatever. And that takes time to unravel, because their legal right over us is the lies we believe, that takes away more and more of our connection to the original, until we lose our perceptions and our discernment and our power and our energy. So if they keep modeling to us these, like, horrific friggin' love bite relationships, which would be like these, I hear stories like this all the time. Like, they think they met their twin flame, but their twin flame might be someone that they haven't met physically, but they might have talked to them one time, or they're working online through a workshop or this or that. And then they suddenly get linked up astrally with the being that's either playing the mask of the guru, or it's or it really is, who's like a sorcerer or a black magician, playing in the astral, connecting with all these people, doing what he thinks is the right thing to do, but he's really loose feeding their energy because something else is working for them. So these twin flame things tend to happen when there's one person who might be actually a plant in the, I'm going to call it the new agey alternative community or whatever, or religious community. And then if they're attached to the wrong entities, like the fallen ones or whatever, and there's plenty of them, then they will have that effect to maybe dream hack and influence and do all kinds of things. And at first they might seem like they're giving you good advice, and they might be connecting like you're your twin flame, but you're not really sure if it's them or not. And then pretty soon it goes into more intrusions and sexual energy manipulation, like V2K, and they'll tell you one good thing, then they come around and taunt you and mock you with another horrible, stupid, torturous, punishing things. And so it's basically an invasion of the counterfeit spirit that just seeks to do what it does like a machine. So it's like a machine program. It becomes this machine-like program to vampirize and replace and counterfeit whatever the original is. So the original becomes one of them in their hive mind or whatever it is. So the infection is like that when we find people who are interacting with somebody, and that somebody is corrupted or taken over or working from, I don't know, the authority of some of these false beings. So I see a lot of that, but then the dynamic of this whole love bite twin flame thing seems to be a predominant, symptom that they come with. They think they've met their twin flame, or they're having these twin flame, super psychic experiences, and, their energy is through the roof, and they've, never experienced it before. And they just go on and on and on, because they want it so bad. Like, who wouldn't want a twin flame and a soulmate with, fantastic, tantric love, sexual energies? I mean, people want that. It's like an addiction. But if you look at the model of how it's operating, now I can see what Barbara Bartholick said years ago, which you said, well, the aliens, they have a breeding out of love program going on. And I thought, I didn't really make the connections. Like, I knew in this love bite kind of thing that often they were unhealthy relationship setups. They could have brought a lot of amazing realizations and even past life memories and psychic abilities and opportunities. But at the same time, there was always something that was a bit I don't know, unhealthy about it and unnatural. So, and if the aliens, let's say the malevolent ones doing this, are trying to make this a copy of what relationships are and families are. And by the way, they would do these love bite setups to people who are already married to one partner and setting them up with somebody else. So they might have an affair
Mm-hmm.
or even be a pregnancy, and then they take the embryo. But, well, I mean, how better way to breed out love than to think your model of relationships is all narcissistic abuse, plain and simple.
To give, man, just
You
to
know what
give
I
you a
mean?
look exactly, and there's it kind of ties in. I wanted to show you this last time, and to give you a little break, because just to give you a little break for a minute, I'm going to play a couple minute clip from an interview that I did with a woman at a conference in 2017 or 18. And I wanted to show you this last time, but I don't think I got around to do it. So let me go and share this screen.
And you also share of how, despite your age and things that have gone on in your life, you are able to still get pregnant.
Yes.
And so go into that just a little bit.
I have no problem going into it. It makes people uncomfortable sometimes. I was 62, and I was dating somebody that I would never have normally dated because intellectually we weren't compatible. He's a 6'6" prison guard, but the sexual chemistry was the most intense. I can't even explain it. It was unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
And we were having sex. I don't know how I held off to the third date, but I did. And I said, and this would be a turnoff to any man, I said, I'm pregnant and it's a boy. And I was. And I was to understand that Drax, my son, my hybrid son, is a combination of me, Mr., and I call him Sid. That's not his name. Sid is an acronym for someone I dated. And I was pregnant for about 9 weeks, and they removed him. And what's ironic is I'm going to be speaking on April 15th. And April 15th is when they removed him, April 15th, 2012. So he will be sick. He would be taken 6. And I say, not born, taken, removed, because he wasn't totally formed. And they take the hybrid children at about 2 to 3 months, and then they take them aboard and they finish the process of development.
So what all does the procedures and process kind of, I guess, imply? Like, what exactly are they doing?
Well, when I was 12, they did a laparoscopy on me, which is a needle in the navel. And they told me that they wanted to see inside. And the reason they used the words see inside is because I was 12. I would never have understood that they were harvesting eggs. And they're creating groups of hybrids for the new Earth. And my son Drax is what they call a thinker, a judge of sorts, as every society needs judges. And those are the words that they gave me, Mr. gave me. Drax is exactly as he is meant to be. He is a gentle and loving being. He is a thinker, a judge of sorts.
How often do you communicate with Mr.?
Oh.
Roughly.
Well, there are periods where it's... In 2012 and 13, it was a continual thing. And when I get messages, I just got a message a couple months ago, and I can tell if they're from Mr. or the collective mind. So I receive messages via either way.
So is it like a intuitive
It's not a voice; it's words that are put in my head.
Exactly.
They're yes. I'm not hearing voices.
So, what do you think of that, Eve? This woman, she was 62. She was 62 and got pregnant from that was a hybrid child from a prison guard that she called Sid, someone I dated, and Mister, who was a reptilian. Is a combination. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's amazing though at 62. Although I think aliens can manipulate so they can make it happen anyway.
Is that a type of love bite thing?
Oh yeah, I mean, for example, like the man she dated, who was someone who's like unlike someone they would normally date, or there was like maybe they weren't compatible on one level, but they were like super duper sexual chemistry through the roof, and he's like 6'6". I'm like, this guy is probably a reptilian host hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
Might have been hosted by the same being, using him as an avatar or a temporary host while the sexual activity was taking place. Because I've heard of women who have had sex with a man who was hosted by a reptilian, and the reptilian will be present during sexual activity. And it could be that if you do get pregnant and that spirit is in the body, that you can be imbued with the spirit, the child of that, the spiritual parent, even though the physical body might be a temporary host. And that might be what happened even in the early days, like in the ancient days. But yeah, they wanted a hybrid child, and then they took it, which is really unfortunate. But they do that. And it's very common. But it's common to have like a love bite set up over and over again if you're an abductee, or I don't know, targeted or whatever it is, so that when you're dating, they tend to you tend to meet these reptilian hosts, or the aliens will engineer these things, and then they'll try to stop sometimes a good relationship. That's what I wrote about in the love bite, where this one guy, he wanted to date one woman, and the aliens sabotaged it, and then they tried to set him up with this future fakings thing just to lure him. And so they're always like messing with, I think, who they want us to be with in order to get what they want. And they wanted a hybrid child.
And something, and you can steer this conversation any way you want to. But you mentioned something about uh virus or something like that a little while ago. So how do we know for sure if we do not have some type of alien parasite or alien mind virus within us? If these non-human intelligences are highly sophisticated in the evolutionary sense, wouldn't they have the capability of hijacking one's autonomy and minds? How do we know that our thoughts and motivations are truly ours?
Oh,
These
yeah.
entities could be like that as a highly advanced internet algorithm. If we talk about, or what we talk about, if we think about, or anything we search on the internet, the algorithm gives us a list of related things to watch and or buy. These
We see.
entities could be doing the same thing, but instead of things to watch or buy, they could be giving our subconscious minds a false sense of free will by implanting numerous thoughts. And we carry on thinking our choice and our thoughts are truly ours.
Yeah, I believe that's true. I remember Dr. Karada Malanga explained it in his alien abduction research, that the aliens, they're always like seeking out a body, which is an interesting thing, always wanting a body. And then it's as if their consciousness, as he understands it, is something like I just call it like a flash drive program of consciousness that needs to insert itself in an eternal souled being, in order to battery it, right? So they use our battery spirit to promote their will of their consciousness. It's like this mind file avatar program virus, so that they live through us, which would be like their consciousness, their agenda, their thoughts, their intentions, whatever, unless we create a coherence between what he called mind, spirit, soul. And his understanding of soul was the anima, which is the eternal now, the big soul. And the spirit was another component that was more energetic and maybe personality based or something. And the mind is how we function in reality and time and space. So in trauma, we can get a disconnect between that coherence from our body, mind, spirit, soul. And so they basically, cut it off. So it's a little bit crooked and they insert themselves here. So we don't connect with what's up here or down here sometimes. So we have to reconnect with our original self, authentic self and spirit, instead of the program and the consciousness and the spirit guides. And they just do so much. They'll try to make it like they're your spirit guides and they're your protectors and they're this and they're that. But like, does your origin have to be like that? If you're really from the eternal all, father, parent, all of is connected with really what Christ wanted us to be and remember, we don't have to identify with any race because we could be anything in this multidimensional universe, depending on what experience we want to have and what form. So I think that a lot of people are misguided and it becomes an identity issue if we identify falsely. Oh, I don't hear you. Yeah.
It's almost like a form of alien Stockholm syndrome because so if the human race, or at least a vast amount of people within the new age and or UFO community, are being used as pawns in a perpetual ongoing psychological warfare agenda by these entities, what better form of alien mind control than to implement a drip drop covert method of control, than to employ propaganda throughout the decades by masquerading a false narrative of their true intentions and true purpose? Basically, you can say these people are in this subversive state of conditioning by these entities that give those the false illusion of love, happiness, oneness, and purpose. But those do not realize that this is all the classic case of alien Stockholm syndrome. But why? Why do these entities employ these nefarious tactics? For what purpose and or agenda do these entities wish to obtain in giving those in the New Age, the UFO community, and other people, just regular Joes, this emotional bond, affection, and false illusion of its true intentions? Those people are truly victims by this alien deception, and are defending the nefarious agendas of these entities at all costs. It's almost like these people have sold their soul to the dark side, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah, that was a good observation. Of course, the whole Stockholm syndrome, that I think is a fawn response from trauma bonding with, let's say, a perpetrator. And if a perpetrator is really good at trauma bonding and, giving someone, I don't think it's intermittent reinforcement of what they want and what they need, then they can cause them to comply more and more with their agenda. And it is a form of, yeah, the mask and the replacement.
And that's why I just called it alien Stockholm syndrome too, because
Yeah.
it's almost like not just people in the new age community, or just people in general, that maybe have, that aren't really in the new age community, that maybe have ties to these entities, or maybe have been abducted or whatever. They reside with their captors, and think it's all love and light, whenever that could just be another mask that's being, another deception.
Yeah. And I would say that, if someone really wants the truth with all their heart, all their mind, all their soul, even if it might not be what they want to believe, then the truth, I think, can come to them and it can be revealed. But if there's this desire inside that it's kind of like, it seems like they will continue coming as long as you have this residual desire to connect with them or to believe them or to feel you're special or, I've seen that, how that happens. But there's some who don't have experiences anymore. I mean, I don't have them anymore with the aliens. And there's others that I've worked with who finally they did their work, their internal trauma work, and their a lot of lucid dreaming and just really observing programming as it was taking place in their consciousness and in the working through others. They started becoming highly aware of how it was working through people and when they were trying to engineer something in their lives and how to get around it. So I think awareness helps. And also sometimes it's just a hard wake-up call if you've gone through so much suffering, and you realize, wow, they said this, but they lied, and then you knew they lied because you remembered more than you should, right?
Mhm.
So, or yeah, I mean that happens like if you're in a bad marriage, right? With like a covert narcissist who's living a double life or something, and you really want to believe in the best thing, and then finally, the truth cracks through, and then that's a real traumatic process of, how did I not see this, and getting mad at yourself for like, how did I not see this, It's but then, there's these things, there's so much going on. And would have to say that within Barbara Bartholick's work, and also what I've observed, sometimes there's this play that goes on. Well, if they can't do one thing, then they'll try another. So they may try the good cop get bad cop thing, where, okay, well, let's say you caught on too much to the obvious reptilian shit, so then they're going to come with something else that is like the savior, or maybe like a counter good alien coming to battle the bad one, or setting you up. And this is what happened in the Dark Side of Cupid cases. They'll set up, let's say, a channeler and someone else who's just a seeker of truth and just wanting to know a bunch of stuff. And then they set them up in these mythic dramas where now, once they start to pick up on, something's not right here, they make it like a good cop, bad cop thing, where your mission is to fight these grandiose mythic battles with dark beings, and it's your mission to be the hero, and they're going to be your warrior guardians to tell you, you're fighting these battles, and then you get involved in all this mythic drama stuff with your twin flame because you need them to work in power together, and they have this wonderful job and agenda, and so that's how that can play out. But it's always like so much drama and so much chaos, and then they try to make you feel special, and you have this, a special mission and blah blah blah. So I think that good cop bad cop thing needs to be assessed, so that people just have to be really honest with themselves too. How can they come to the truth inside by just being willing to let go of all lies, even if they don't know what they are, so that the truth can come into their consciousness and start filling them up with original truth instead of counterfeit lies, the counterfeits. And that really takes courageousness and humility, and renouncing wanting to believe or be popular, or I mean, they cause us to be so targeted and so abused. Like if you don't play the party line and with the popular group who's getting all the attention, and go to those great retreats out and calling on UFOs and those meditations or whatever it is, and be so popular, and then you go against the grain, well, and they punish you, and throw you in poverty and give you abusive relationships and kill your mentors. I mean, when you go against the grain of their control system, and you start seeing what it really is, and who they're connected to, and the families they're connected to, and the governments, and the this and the that.
Yep.
Then it's like, okay, now I could see how they manipulate people. But a lot of people are also innocent, I think, innocently being manipulated in a way where, if they knew the truth and they had the opportunity for healing and recovery, that they maybe wouldn't be doing what they're doing, or they wouldn't give it power.
So with this counterfeit spirit, and it's almost like there's this cosmic chess match that's going on. It's just like, what the hell is going on here? And I've asked this before with a few other guests. You know, I think it goes back. This play, this game, with us, this loose feeding and everything else goes back to the ancient times. So from the ancient times through past traumatic events and earthly cataclysms, we collectively manifested possibly an archetypal entity in our subconscious minds. And the traumatic events that we endured in the ancient times allow these entities to harness our traumas as a food source, almost like we are the portals to these negative and dark influences and forces to manifest into this reality. Maybe we were the incubator for these entities to grow stronger and stronger over thousands of years. And through all the trials and tribulations we have faced over the eons, in human beings in a constant state of fear and survival mode throughout history. This dark archetypal force, these entities, the devil, Satan, whatever you want to call it, has latched onto the deepest levels within our subconscious minds, almost like a parasitic attachment to our soul, and has been one of many reasons why the human race has been in this constant state of survival mode, wars and rumors of wars. Maybe we unknowingly project the needs, wants, and agenda of this archetypal figure into the world. Maybe we subconsciously project this into the world almost like we are being steered by this parasitic puppet master. Hence, the human race and the rest of the world is in this constant perpetual state of a negative influence from our deepest subconscious minds that originate in the very ancient of times. So, hope I explained that a little well.
Yeah. Well, I think it's definitely ancient. And whatever they are, I think some people describe them as really long living, like the Anunnaki, for example, living thousands of years, or some living longer. That if they do have an agenda, they'll be playing the long game. So it could be culminating where there's so much more influence, connections, and treaties, and um, you know, now with technology and where we're going, there's more involvement on many other levels that maybe wasn't done in the old days, but who knows how many times we might have been reset. And yeah, I think it does act like a virus, but a virus that which really doesn't have true life, because it doesn't, has to use that which has true life to, and what do you call it, reproduce itself through us. So if we can be resilient to their viral replication, which is a copying, right? The copying, counterfeit, then we can stop it, or we can at least, I think, cause it to be quiet. Like in Dr. Corrado Malanga's example of how they create what he calls their active alien memory, which is like their little consciousness of all the memories and a lot of, like a hard drive of a whole bunch of experiences of this being who is not eternal, is not really eternal, but lives through many hosts. Then if we just disconnect it from the battery, we could make it a passive, he called it active alien memory, is when it's connected to your soul battery, and it becomes passive when you disconnect it from your eternal soul or spirit, he called anima. And then we continuously work with our own anima to make sure that that connection is severed, so it becomes a passive program. So it would be like a dead inert virus in us that, our immune system's good enough, it won't take us. But when our immune system gets down and we disconnect from our eternal self, and that one has a chance to replug in, then it can replicate itself again. So I just think that it's almost like a machine. It's like the Ouroboros machine that has to eat itself. It's like a vampire. So, and it becomes, I think, because it's disconnected somehow from the eternal, well, maybe that's what we call the fallen state, it loses the wisdom and the mercy and the logic of emotional intelligence. So it just comes like a machine, like hive mind directed behaviors to get something that they don't care if we don't know what they're doing. They don't care if it causes us confusion. In fact, they want us to be confused. They create excessive confusion. So we're always following this, what do you call it, goose chase of trying to figure out what they want and what they're really doing, and these narratives they're throwing, these telepathic messages we're getting, and these stories and this and that, and this endless puzzle to chase on a mental level. And then that's part of the game, if you ask me. It's that's how they create the confusion to copy out the original while they vampirize you. So you just become them in their hive mind. And so that's like this ancient program, whatever it is. So we really have to connect with original beingness that is outside of the lies and the conditioning and the bullshit, which is a lot of times we want to believe the bullshit because it's better to, if we don't have our human needs met. I mean, this is the bottom line. They abuse us from childhood, oftentimes severely, so that we don't get our basic attachment needs met with a loving parent. So we never know real healthy love we're always looking for a connection of love or acknowledgement or whatever it is, maybe in an unhealthy way, because that wound is so deep, right? And so then we'll just follow after anybody who might give us attention or get involved in cults, because cults create the family we never had, right? Like that's why cults are so effective. And a lot of times people fall into cult-like groups in order to receive something, feel special, and like their ideology, and then maybe get involved with the guru, cult leader, and then they find out, oh my God, it's another one of them. And they're almost always like, I'm not going to say all of them, hosted by one of these beings, and then they're going to have like oftentimes have sex with many people in the group or connect these astral cords with the entities in them to loose feed and create all these things in order to get something out of that cult member. And if anybody questions the cult leader and the cult narrative, then they smear campaign you and take away everything, that you have. So they leave you homeless or whatever. It's just the same game they're playing over and over again. And yeah.
Do and you were earlier, you were talking about, you said something about GMOs, and I forgot what else you was talking about that was related to that. It's part of the counterfeit, this just counterfeit reality in general. Um, and something I've been kind of contemplating. Um, do you think that, you know, there's this non-human influence that is subconsciously or consciously guiding those in power and influence to push the earth towards this transhuman smart grid type world? Because we have, 5G for a tiny example. If we are being constantly bombarded by this invisible soup of frequencies that are being emitted via Wi-Fi, satellites, cell towers, and cell phones, just to name a few, could these invisible frequencies create or potentially create the perfect environment for these entities to remain in this reality for longer periods of time? On top of all that, these frequencies can drain one's energy to the point to where we can more easily be controlled, manipulated, and possibly inhabited by these entities.
Yeah, I would say yes. Yeah, it's a progressive long game of complete control and access and entrapment of the true power source, which is the human soul. But they want us to be zombified so that we're passive and controlled, but they're still linked into our battery. Um, and that's sad because I think it's linked into our biology. And if we get so disconnected from our soul, but it's still connected, and this is what Dr. Karada Malanga found, that, you know, they want us disconnected enough so that they can access and live through us and then get the goodies, basically, which is the power to create probably a permanent reality that they can stay in while feeding off of us. I would imagine, though, with the depopulation agenda, they still have to need a certain number of souled beings. Um, but then again, if they entrap it in a type of bardo that can't escape, then they still have those souls that died who are going to, be reincarnated or recycled into the controlled bodies that are pretty zapped out. And some people think that's the whole mark of the beast thing. It's a progressive zombification and control of the human body so that it no longer can really have the free will component connected to eternal spirit, which is really, this goes back to the manipulation of perception. Somehow, if that's how they're so good at it. I mean, there's endless, countless descriptions in even old UFO books that talk about how, let's say, normals, we call them normals, who don't normally have, abductions or experiences, and they may have an encounter with somebody else that's associated with the phenomena or an interview or something, and then that normal gets completely like taken over or put into a trance state to basically do nothing and be completely controlled so that whatever the other person wanted to do or to share couldn't happen, or they just don't notice when someone has had missing time and they should come to work on time and they're really late, and all, somebody normally who's your boss would be like, hey, you're late, what the hell's going on? And oh, they just didn't notice. Like, how could they manipulate our perception not to notice something really, really important? And I think, to go on a rant on with this one, this is what drives me, is if they can control us to the extent that they can make it so they can access our children even more, which is not good.
Mhm.
Right? So they'll take away our parental, like creating, let's say, dysfunctional relationships, extreme stress, or putting the family system within a type of cult narrative system. So that cult narrative system is the operational cult that distracts their belief systems or their attention from what the children might be experiencing. And then if their attention is drawn away, then they can access the kids. And the reason why I say this is because I believe that there's, well, certain religious groups have been known to be operational cult systems hiding ritual abuse and satanic ritual abuse. But there's also channeling cults that have done the same thing, who instead of, let's say, being, the Mormon cult or whatever you want to call it, it would be a channeling positive ET cult where a lot of it seems really positive and there might be some quirks to it that seem really good. And the channeler is basically kind of a good person, but then that belief system, which maybe was a false light thing, allowed them to believe, oh, well, then all aliens are good. And if they're having contact, well, it must be the good ETs and they're special and they're a special star seed. And I wonder what star family they're from and da 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 da. But when they believed that, it took away their awareness that they were being abducted and mind controlled and tortured by the reptilians and the Dracos as a mind controlled slave in the secret space program. And so that operational cult believing it's all wonderful and good and spiritually advanced and da 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 just access their kids to be tortured and abused in a program. So
Mhm.
see, this is the danger of certain cult belief systems who they have to believe something black and white, and they create this black and white conflict that will maintain the dissociative split so they could access who they want and handle the whole family, right? So
It boils down to, again, this loose feeding, this why the energy, why do they want our energy? Is because our spirit, our soul, our essence, that's what they lust after, because that's the energy that emits from our spirit, that make what makes us human, that makes us have this physical experience here. And they do not have that, and they envy us because we can create, we love, we have these experiences that that they can have, and David Icke, I've said this a few times in his global conspiracy book, when we quote, when we feel fear, we generate a vibration and energy field. Every time we think and feel, no matter what our state of being may be, we are sending out broadcast waves that vibrate to the frequency of the particular thought or emotion. We feel these frequencies coming from people in what we call vibes. The low vibration of fear and its association emotions like anger, aggression, stress, and guilt produce frequencies that pour into the inner space plane, and this has become the energy source of these reptilians and other entities. The more humanity feels fear in all its forms, the more energy, power the reptilians and other inner space entities have to sustain them and use back against us. The entire global system has been designed to generate the energy of fear, stress, and suffering, and turn the human population into an energy source. End quote.
yeah, I would agree. Um, but I think what drives and compels these beings, some, the Gnostics thought, well, it's envy, like envy and jealousy was the primary quality of some of these major archons who are running the counterfeit spirit. But it's also not only a desire to copy and counterfeit, but to corrupt and pollute and steal, kill, destroy, to take what they don't have because they lost it or something, or they maybe they willingly lost it through the fall, whatever that is. And so they're mad about it, and well, they know that if they don't get back what they had, they will die. I mean, they're literally like shrivel up and die. Like if they lost their eternal life, why do they ain't gonna live very long unless they do some serious vampiring, right? So then there's no life for them unless maybe they repent or they, get back to the source or something. But this whole fear thing, it's when we realize that because so many people are being targeted and they're going through I mean, I know a lot of people like the ones who are wanting to recover and tell the truth about the MyLab program and all this TI stuff. They want to tell the truth, but they get seriously targeted and like retributions and reprisals. We used to get that all the time, whenever we talked about like the woo and the reptilian stuff, we'd always get psychic attacks and bad shit would happen.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a thing. I actually was just listening to some Christian people who did high level deliverance ministries and connecting more and more to Christ and getting to how there's this legalism way in which we say the kingdom of darkness is operating through a type of legalistic claim that they have in order to enter into and do what they do. And then there's a way to reconnect with let's say, the mind of Christ, for lack of a better term, so that we basically disengage from fear because our faith and our connection with Christ is so great that the fear has no longer Velcro to stick to, or any of the other things that will actually create the reality of kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy of fear. But it's hard though if you've been conditioned over and over and over again, you're really hurting to not always, be a wondering, what happens next show, I do this or blah, blah, blah. But it's a strong faith until you have such a strong connection that the faith becomes a deeper realization of connection with Christ and with the eternal that really becomes your original identity. And I think it really is our identity in Christ is what was always meant from the original teachings of Christ. And that really is the solution to the problem here. And even said in the Bible, he comes to destroy the works of the devil and the adversary, because he knows that it's a big problem and it's corrupted generations and generations to be abused and abusers and war, and they're manipulated and they're taken over, and then they keep following the same old stupid shit over and over again, like a dumb program, and they can't get out of the friggin' program. It's a program. And then they normalize the program. They normalize that they give their sacrifices to Ashtaroth or Baal or whoever God is, being the counterfeit instead of the real and the original that they keep forgetting. So that was actually the essence of a lot of the Bible was like, okay, don't go after the fake ones who are this blood sacrifice crap. Go after the original. And then once you get the original in you, it lives in your heart and it knows the truth and it knows the law and it lives it through your heart. I mean, that's how I see it. Although other people may have different views of what that is. But I still think, I mean, I could babble on because I've been through many different spiritual traditions and beliefs and practices and ended up coming back to basic Christianity because what I felt was that many of these others either escalated the open doorways of influence of the darker ones who are loose feeding, or they made you so passive that it just enabled the predator by basically like excessive Buddhist passivity kind of thing, or the self-abasing passivity thing where we really need to deal with the real enemy, and we can't believe something that's going to enable the predator by not understanding what these predators are doing through all these belief systems to just keep their human trafficking subpopulations going to feed them. And I think they've done this through a lot of beliefs of inequality in relationships. Like I know male female, for example, where if one gender is just assumed to be really not as valuable, then that creates the whole source of problems that just escalates everywhere. So we have to just realize there's equality in our complementarity, right? Between male and female, there's equality in our complementarity, and then we're different, but there's value in each of those complementary parts, whatever. And Yeah, there's just so much. But it boils down to relationships, though, in my view, since that's my thing, is if we can deal with this in our relationship with ourself, with our creator, with others, we can live it more easily. Um, because one of the addictions that I see with our Western society in general, the super high tech, is to get so caught up in the entertainment aspect of the super mental intellectual realm of how important technology is and how important science is and how smart I am. And like we see this actually in in like the aerospace and the super technology and the IT this and the digital that, whatever. It's like, oh, it's just so technical and so smart and so, better than everything else. I'm like, wait a minute here. We're taking our consciousness out of the beingness, the fullness of beingness connected to the original that has everything in it. The kingdom of heaven is already here. We don't need to jump off into this da, 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 da. And then we got co-opted by all these aliens giving all this technology. And then what happened? The whole human race is co-opted by this advanced technology that's just going to destroy us. It's almost better that we didn't have it in some ways, because I think a lot of it is addictions. It acts as an addiction.
We have a bunch of nihilists that are probably being influenced from these entities, these nihilists, they reject all moral principles, religions, and they try to create their own belief systems, and I think that's the reason why we're in this technotropic technological age, this where we're trying to get these brain chips and Neuralink, AI, everything involved with transhumanism, making it trying to they're trying. What I think one aspect of this is one variable of the agenda. I wouldn't say the ultimate agenda, but one variable of the agenda is to push us towards that AI transhuman uh type future world reality, because we first off we lose our autonomy, we lose what it's like to be human, taking the family out of the picture, everything. And they want us to live in that type of future because where we're plugged in almost like a hive mind Borg consciousness, you know, because like I said, these technocrats are being led, I think, by these dark influences, sub subconsciously or consciously, to push us towards that future, because I think it will make us more hackable by these negative and dark influences.
Yeah. Controllable too. Yeah.
Controllable. But why? Why would they want to make us more hackable and plugged into this hive mind Borg AI transhuman consciousness? Is it because are they lusting after something? Like Nigel Kerner, you talked everybody that a lot of people I've talked to. Is it the soul? Is that what they really are after? The spirit? Is that the ultimate end game? Is to drain? That is the ultimate food source. The
Yeah, it's a
soul is the food source.
Yeah, because it's a finite Ouroboros system of a fallen system of beings that are trying to, do everything they can. Like the psychopath who's, it's like, how they go crazy? Kind of like, if that person can't have you, then nobody can. And then they like kill them and then they kill themselves and they shoot everybody else in the post office or whatever. And it becomes like this psychopathic, they lose their it becomes a psychopathic mind, a psychopathic hive mind of just they have to have what they have and they're going to do everything they can to get it regardless of any belief systems of, integrity or values. I mean, they lose it. And I think that's what we're in is we need to defend our humanity and our original beingness. And it's like not allow the predators to be these narcissistic abusers who think that it's all about them after all. Well, it's not. Guess what? It's not all about them after all. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? We have power and we need to recover that with one another who gets it and just, tune them out, like turn them all, turn the volume down so we no longer hear their
Yep.
but I don't know. It's culminating into a lot of extreme invasiveness in our bodies. And we found this out early on with alien implants, and now with the Dr. Anna Milhatia, and the stuff found in the blood and the graphene and all of that, it plays its part. So our we really need to be on the ball with connecting with original source truth. Yeah.
I guess to round things off for this time, I meant to ask you this, but I didn't really want to interrupt the flow too much. So you with this counterfeit. So my wife, she's a psych nurse. Um, she deals with a lot of mental illness, schizophrenic, multiple personality disorders, all that in between. So, do you think those people that say first off, I guess it's a two-part thing. We're going to end it after this. It's a two-part thing. Maybe they're not actually hearing voices. Maybe they are actually inhabited. Maybe these people that had these mental illnesses, what are claimed to be mental illnesses, or maybe a vast majority of them, or just a few of them. Maybe they have been co-opted or counterfeited. Maybe they actually that is the ultimate goal, or maybe that's another variable of the goal is to have these individuals. I guess what I'm trying to say, maybe those mental illness patients that my wife sees, uh, takes care of, maybe they are taken over, and that multiple personality disorder and everything else, that's part of that counterfeit that you talk about.
Part of it is like, yeah, because a lot of times there is entities and you do hear them telepathically for sure, or the introject of the abuser. And then sometimes, like if they put in programming, then you can hear it play over and over, but it's the programming that they told you or that you believed. That might be the inner voice, the inner critic kind of thing. So I don't think they're all like possessed, but there is, I think that they seek to possess. And I think I can't remember the guy who talks about this, but he basically proved it with as they did more prayer and more, spiritual hygiene and really true recovery, those things did dissipate. But with DID, that's done through trauma where parts of the self split, but those parts are not demons. And there's actually therapists who work with being able to distinguish between an alter and a demon or an entity, because sometimes alter parts can be angry and have like an angry disposition, or the crier, or there's different parts in DID. So that where you would just have to assess for it and just keep working with the original. You work with the primary identity that has the capacity to be with greater and greater emotional volume of the conflict. And then we bring truth to that based on what created the split. But it's not necessarily a demon. But I truly believe that the power of Christ works tremendously with healing DID. Because a lot of this is a spiritual disease in general. I mean, we're talking about we are being predated upon by some pretty dark spiritual forces, you know? So,
And maybe that majority of the population, you, I, and others are listening, most of us, we can only see what they say. We see less than 1% of the visible light spectrum, in our senses. What if these what they call mental illness patients? What if how how can they tell or not tell if they aren't seeing beyond that 1%? You know what I mean?
oh,
Or like maybe they're seeing into realities that we just do not have the capacity to understand, or to even research into that, because we don't know where to start. You know what I mean? Because we're limited with our own senses, our own projections, and our own visible, our all of our senses. We're limited to a certain narrow bandwidth, and maybe these mental illness patients are beyond that collective bandwidth that all of us see. and
Yeah,
witness.
autistic, like a lot of autistic and autistic spectrum actually are very psychic.
Mhm.
Um, and people who've been dissociated in trauma, they actually, a lot of them have natural psychic abilities, just like many, quote, abductees or those they claim are actually part hybrids actually have much more of the telepathic thing going on. But I think there's a positive and a negative aspect to that, because if we be in our body and we really heal our dissociation, we won't be as assailed by that in a bad way. But sometimes you see too much when you're when you're so I don't know, psychic or dissociated, that you just start seeing too much and you just actually need to shut it down.
Mhm.
So yeah, trauma can actually cause psychic ability, actually. Yeah.
So we're going to end it for this time. My bandwidth is starting to struggle again, but yeah, Eve, it was it's always a honor, privilege, a treat to have you on, and I look forward to more conversations down the road. Thank you very much.